Hey, it's Allie Edwards, and welcome to another episode of Craft the Story. This week, we are going to talk about one of my personal favorite topics that relates to memory keeping, scrapbooking, storytelling, journaling, all of it. It's called the lens of story. All right, so I feel like we should start off by talking about, first of all, what the heck is a lens, right? This is something that I talk about regularly in my classes, in my projects. We talk about using a lens, essentially something to look through, right? To see things in a different way. So for Day in the Life, if you've been following along with this Craft the Story series, you saw a video on Day in the Life. And in that, we talked about different lenses that I used for that project, like the lens of gratitude or the lens of time. Basically, what it does is it gives a little bit of structure to how we're approaching memory keeping. But the overall lens, the thing that I look through every single day in my life, is this idea of a lens of story. Now, I want you to do something silly or think about something silly. I was trying to visualize how do I talk about this in a way that can make sense for people. And I was thinking about putting on my glasses, right? I was getting up this morning, I was doing my hair, I was, taking care of all the things that I needed to take care of. And as I was putting on my glasses, I was thinking about the idea of lens. Obviously, lens lends itself to looking through something. But for me, it's almost like putting on my glasses helps me begin to look through the lens of my glasses for the lens of story. So what if you were to pick up a pair of your own glasses, or just imagining, right, putting on a pair of glasses where now that you have those glasses on, as you look around your life, you are looking through the lens of story. And what does that mean? So for me, the lens of story is really rooted in like storytelling structures, chapters, paragraphs, narrators, characters. So if you think in terms of story, for me, looking through the lens of story means that I am the narrator of this story, right? I am the writer of this story. Nobody else can tell the story in the same way that I can tell this. And I cannot tell other people's stories in the same way as they would tell their own story, because I'm not them, right? I'm not living in their body. I don't have the same thoughts, feelings, life experiences, right? Everybody has their own way that they experience the world. So a couple weeks ago, in one of the videos where you heard me talk about how I do this for myself, I scrapbook for myself first and foremost. That really goes hand in hand with this idea of me being the narrator, right? I am writing my own story as I go along in my life, but I'm also in charge, and I am the boss of my scrapbooks and the stories that I choose to tell there. So as the narrator of my story, when I put those glasses on, really what it does, and this is how I live my life, right? I don't put the glasses are already on for me. As I go about my life, I am paying attention to stories that pop up. I am actively looking for stories that I might want to document, or looking for the ways that the other characters are moving in and out of my story. So in my case, the main characters in my story are my immediate family, right? Erin, the kids, Chris and Tiffany, Girl Erin, that's Erin's ex-wife. We call her Girl Erin, and she knows that, and it's a very big, happy family thing to call her Girl Erin, because when you have two Erins, it can get a little bit confusing. But those are the main characters that are kind of weaving in and out of my story as I live it today, right? Those are the characters in my story today. If we were to go back 15 years ago, some of the characters are the same and some of the characters are different. So as I look at my own life, as I identify stories that I want to tell, and as I act as the narrator, I'm investigating and I'm paying attention. I'm looking for the ways that those characters are moving in and out. All of the stories that I've told over the years about any of the kids, about myself, those all come from my perspective, right? They are things that I saw, things that I felt, things that I witnessed, things that I think is potentially a way that someone else might be experiencing something, but I don't know because I'm not them. So living with a story lens really gives us the opportunity to look at who are the characters in our story, and when do we want to bring in pieces of their story, and when do we want to leave pieces of their story out? Right? That's part of what we get to choose as the narrator of our own story. When I have those story lenses on, another thing that comes up for me is this idea of chapters, right? As a narrator, I am witnessing, I am paying attention, I am looking for the beginnings and ends of chapters in my life. And that informs a lot of the stories that I choose to tell. It also informs and helps me remember that life is made of seasons, right? Life is made of really intense, beautiful, awesome seasons and really low, hard times, and then everything in between. And the stories that I want to tell in my scrapbooks, I want them to be a combination of all of those different stories. I want to include the challenging chapters alongside the really happy chapters, alongside the boring, everything feels the same, Groundhog's Day chapters. And so because I am constantly looking through that lens of story, I feel like I am more able to know when they're happening, right? And know when a new chapter is beginning, know when a chapter is ending. And these are things that you already know are happening in your own life. But when you place this lens of story on top of it, it gives you a different perspective about life, as well as helping you to tell more of the stories in your scrapbooks, in your journaling, in whatever memory keeping adventures you want to embark on. So how do you get to this place where you are living with a predominantly more of a story lens as your primary lens? How do you get to that place? I think that really what it takes, as with so many things in our life, is practice, right? Practice paying attention to these story themes coming up. Practice being aware of the chapter that you are in right now. Practice thinking of the people in your life as characters in this overall story of your life, and practice viewing yourself as the narrator, right? You get to choose how you respond to the pieces of your story. You get to choose how you write about them. You get to choose how you respond in person related to them, right? Like so much of this stuff about memory keeping and scrapbooking for me is interwoven into the ways that I live my life. And I totally recognize for some people, it may not go as deep as this. It may not be as much of a storytelling lifestyle, but the possibility is there for you if you want to try it out, you want to practice it, you want to start viewing yourself as the narrator, viewing the other people as characters, and see what does that do to your memory keeping? What kind of impact does it have on it? Do you tell longer stories because of it? Do you tell more or less stories? And I don't necessarily think that telling more stories, you don't get a medal for telling more stories. How about that? You don't get a ribbon for telling more stories. So telling more or less stories has not ever been like the blue ribbon thing for me, right? You could tell less stories that are more meaningful, more impactful to yourself as well as anybody else that views it. So I don't place a value on more or less. It's simply, are you telling stories that are meaningful to you and that help you walk through your life? I feel like that's what storytelling does for me. Another reason why I like this concept of a story lens or a storytelling mindset or living with the story lens is the idea that I feel like it really helps us get to the why. So when you are walking around in your life and you're seeing all the different things that are happening and, you know, some of the high points and some of the low points. And for me, as I live through those sorts of things now, I'm really able to be like, okay, this is just a chapter, or this is just a paragraph in this overall story of my life. But as I look through the lens of story, I can see the who and the what and the where and the when, right? I can find those things pretty easy. But I feel like having the lens of story or looking through the lens of the story more regularly helps me get to my reasons why more often. So why is this important? Or why is this a piece of the story that I want to tell? Or why am I going to take my time to even tell this story, right? By looking through the lens of story, I think we get closer to the why. We get closer to the reasons why things are this way or that way, or it helps us understand why we loved something or disliked something. It just gives us more information when we are able to look through this lens of story. So for me, living with story as my primary lens, or this lens of story, one of the things that it does for me is it really has become, like I said already, a part of the way that I live my life. So I am actively looking for stories that I want to document, stories that I want to record. And I have an example for you that actually came about a couple days ago. On Valentine's Day, my mom had sent a text message. There are two things that happened on a couple different days. One was my mom sent a text message to myself and my two siblings on Valentine's Day. It was actually from both my parents. And it was just a really cute, special, nice message from them. And I'm going to read it to you because I think it was really nice. Allie, John, and Jessica, happy Valentine's Day to each of you and your families. I am having lots of memories this morning of years past, Valentine's Day treats and cards and lots of candy. As you were growing up, sharing those times with all of you was special. I am so thankful for each of you and all the days we spent together as a family. The ups and downs of life, our family history. I always wanted the days to be peaceful, happy, and full of love. Life gives us the opportunity to learn through the good days and the not so good days. Life is not all candy and roses, yet we can do our best to focus on the good and do our part to help make good days. Your dad and I wish for each of you and your families more of those happy days in your life. Love to all of you forever and ever, Mom and Dad, Valentine's Day 2021. That was a text. It was a text message or an email. It was one of the two of those. So it was something that she sent to us, and I thought it was awesome. And you can probably hear as I read this that this is definitely my mom, and this is the kind of words and the kinds of things that she has said to me throughout my life. It's been a very positive, life-affirming. The words that I've gotten from her have always been that way, and I've been very, very lucky and very conscious that has been a piece of what she taught me growing up, of the importance of words and the importance of saying things. So really, for me, story has been my lens for a very long time. But when I saw this, for me, I was like, immediately, I'm going to copy and paste that, and I'm going to print it out on a 4x6 card, because living with story as a lens makes me recognize things immediately that I want to take action on. So in this case, having her send something like this, or my parents send something like this, I immediately wanted to print it out. I didn't necessarily immediately want to make a scrapbook page. I didn't necessarily want to write a big, long story about it, but I wanted to keep it. Right? Because this is a piece of my story that feels important to me. And because I look at my life through the lens of story, I can easily recognize when there are things like this that jump out to me. So what I decided to do was simply print that out, print it, just literally copied and pasted it into a box in Photoshop, and you can do it in Word or whatever. That doesn't really matter. You could handwrite it if you wanted to. My mom has always been great with email, text messages, writing letters. Like that is a part of the way that she expresses herself, the part of the way that she lives her story, right? And then within the next couple of days after receiving that, she also sent a picture of the house that I grew up in Washington State, which is very snowy right now. One of the neighbors there took a picture of the outside of the house that I grew up in, that's in this beautiful blanket of snow. And so I thought to myself, like, okay, that's super simple. I could literally just pair those two things together, which is what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to put them in the scrapbook, right? So this is me taking action on a story thought, right? I'm living with this lens of story. I'm looking for stories that I want to be a part of the bigger overall story of my life. And this fits, right? This is something that I want to include in there. So I'm literally just going to take this and I'm going to pop it right into the pockets here, the 4x6 pockets in my 6x8 album. And that's a story told. Right, that is a story told. It doesn't have to have product on it. It doesn't have to have crafty designs. It absolutely can. I could take this content, I could take this information here, and I could build it into a much bigger page, right? That is absolutely something that I could do, but maybe I don't have the time. Maybe I have other projects I'm working on, but I knew that I wanted to capture this. And so simply just taking it and printing it out, taking action on that story thought, right? I can just take it, print it out, slip it into the pocket. So for me, that is a really good example of the way that I live generally in everyday life with the story lens first and foremost. That is just a way that I have come to live my life. Have I always lived this way? Probably not. I think that once I started memory keeping and scrapbooking back in 2002, that was the beginning for me of really recognizing the power of story in my life, the power of words to actually impact the way that I live, the way that I feel about myself, and process all of that through this crafty hobby. So let's review really quickly as we wrap up here. In this Craft the Story series, some weeks we're going to make projects, some weeks we're just going to talk about the philosophy behind storytelling and memory keeping and scrapbooking, and some weeks we'll have an interesting mixture of the two or something else entirely. But to review today, I want you to consider putting on those story glasses, right? What happens if you put those on in your own life? What happens if you walk around with those on for a day? What kinds of stories do you see? What kinds of stories do you feel? What kinds of stories do you notice? And how does it impact the way you pay attention in your regular life? Does it make an impact if you start looking at yourself as the narrator, looking at your family members or other important people or pets in your life as the characters in your story, and then really starting to embrace the idea of chapters in your own life. What kind of difference does that make for you if you start seeing things as chapters, as you start maybe accepting a little bit more that the ebb and flow between chapters, and some chapters are long and some chapters are short and some chapters are full of insight and other chapters are just super boring. Like, that is the reality. And you can take all of that information and bring that into the way that you approach documenting and storytelling and memory keeping in your own life. Okay, so last up, I am inviting you to put those glasses on. I want to know what happens if you put those glasses on in your own life. How does that make a difference for you? And what do you see? If you're loving this content, please click subscribe. That's the best way for you to be notified if a new video pops up here on my channel, and we'll be back here again next week.